So the first thing we're going to go over today is our homework review. So yesterday you had to factor each of your problems completely using factor by grouping method. So what that was you broke the problem basically into two parts. So you did the first half, and it's not letting me highlight only half of it. So you did the first half, and then you factored out the second half. So we're gonna find the common factor between x squared and negative 1x. And the common factor is x. Now we got to work back and figure out how do we get x squared. We got to multiply x by x. And how do we get 1x back? Minus 1. Now we're going to go and factor out the second half. What's the common factor between the two of these? It's 1. So how do we get 1x? We got to multiply by 1. And how do we get negative 1? Multiply 1 by negative 1. So what we want to get is we want to have these two parentheses right here match each other. When they match each other, that's good, because that way we know, okay, we're going to end up using one set of those parentheses. So we're going to use 1x1 or x minus 1. And then we need our second parenthesis, which is x, and then this number on the outside. The second set of parentheses is the numbers that are on the outside. So what's on the outside? X and 1. So it's x plus 1. This is our final answer right here. If we wanted to check to make sure this was the correct factoring, we would do FOIL, and then we should get this back, or you would get the simplified form. Let's try this one. X squared minus 13x plus 13x minus 169. Okay, let's find the common factor between x squared and negative 13x. The common factor between x squared and minus 13x is x. And then same thing. How do we get x squared back? Multiply it by x. How do we get 13x? Multiply it by minus 13. Now let's work with the second set of the second part in the yellow. We have 13x minus 169. Common factor, the greatest common factor is 13. And how do we get 13x? Multiply it by x. And then how do we get negative 169? 13 times negative 13. Then what do we have? We have our parentheses that are the same. So we're going to take one of those and rewrite one of them. And then we also have this over here, this red x and this 13. So that's going to be our other parenthesis. Now since there's no negative sign in front of that 13, it's plus 13. Let's try number 3. So we have 6x squared minus 15x plus 4x minus 10. First thing, let's break it up into two problems. So we did that. Now we're going to find the greatest common factor between 6x and negative 15x. Greatest common factor is 3x. How do we get 6x? We got to multiply 2. And how do we get negative 15? We got to multiply 3x by negative 5. Now we're going to work with our second part of the problem, this 4x minus 10. Greatest common factor between the two is 2. How do we get 4x back? We got to multiply 2 by 2x. How do we get 10 back? We got to or negative 10. We got to multiply 2 by negative 5. So now we got here. Now we have our two sets that match each other. So we write one of them once, 2x minus 5, and our other set of parentheses is going to be this 3x and this 2. So it's 3x plus 2. And lastly, for number 4, we have 3x squared minus 5x plus 9x minus 15. As always, we're going to break it up into two parts. So we have this now, and we're going to factor out the greatest common factor. So let's work with this first half. So the greatest common factor between 3x squared and negative 5x is x. How do we get 3x squared back? We got to multiply x by 3x. How do we get 5x back? We got to multiply by -5. Okay, we've got that done. And now let's work with this second half over here. What's the greatest common factor between 9x and -15? 3. What are we going to multiply 3 by to get 9x? 3x. And what are we going to multiply 3 by to get -15? -5. Okay, we got to this point. Now we got to find, we have our twins. So we highlight them, or I'm just highlighting them here. So we know there's 2 of the same, so we're only going to use one of those. We have 3x minus 5. And we're going to take what's on the outside of those parentheses and group those together. So we have x and a 3, so x plus 3. That is our final answer. So the lesson we have for today is basically going to build upon what we did yesterday. I could have taught you this lesson, what we're going to do right here first, and then what we did yesterday comes later on in the chapter, but I felt by me showing you guys how to factor by grouping first, it's going to help you out with this lesson now. So now we're going to be working with 8.6 factoring in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. We're on page 518 in the textbook. And as a little reminder, a, b, and c represent numbers. So we already did our homework review. So when we factor in ax squared plus bc plus c, when we factor in that form, what we're going to do is a, b, and c are any number. This right here should be an x. So that should be an x. So a, b, and c are any number. So what we're going to do is multiply a, this a right here, times c right over here. Because remember, this should be an x. We have to find the factors of a times c that have the sum b. So I wrote our little x in. So we're going to have to find factors of a. So we're going to multiply a times c, and we're going to get a number. Then we're going to have to find factors of whatever that number was that have the sum of b. And then we're going to add the factors of a times c that gives you sum b. So we're going to go over this. So we have 5x squared plus 11x plus 2. Now you can't factor this right off from the beginning, right off from the beginning. At the beginning of the week, we didn't have a number in front of x, so you were just able to go ahead and solve it or factor it. Just if it was x squared plus 11x plus 2, you would have been able to factor it. Now we have a number in front of this x squared, so now the factoring's a little more involved. So the first thing we're going to do is multiply whatever number is in front of the x squared variable by the number at the end, by the number that's in the c place. So remember a, b, c. So we're going to multiply 5 times 2. When we do that, 5 times 2 gives us 10. So now what we need to do is start listing factors of 10. And then we're going to also have to find their sum. So we're going to list factors of 10 that are going to have to add up to whatever b is. So it has to add up to what? To 11 here. So our factors of 10. How do we get 10? We can multiply 1 times 10. Sum of 1 plus 10 is 11. What else is a factor? 2 and 5. What's the sum of 2 and 5? 7. So we could stop there. What were we looking for? We were looking for sum of 11. So we found it using factors 1 and 10. So now what you have to do is you have to rewrite this. So now we have to rewrite 5x squared plus 1x plus 10x plus 2. So what we did here was we went from a 3-term polynomial now to a 4-term polynomial. What we did is we took the factors of 10 and rewrote the sum, or rewrote b in here. So we're using the factors of 10, we're rewriting this, right? So the original problem had sum, or b was 11. So we're going to use our factors to rewrite it. So our factors that gave us sum 11 were 1 and 10. So now we're going to write plus 1x plus 10x. If you simplified them back down, you got this answer back. So you're basically working backwards. You're breaking up whatever's in the middle, that middle term, you're going to break it up. So I'm going to break this up. So we have 5x squared plus 1x plus 10x plus 2. Why did we use 1 and 10x again? Because that was the factors of 10 that gave us 11. So now we're going to go ahead and break it up into our two problems like we were doing yesterday. Now we're going to find the greatest common factor between 5x squared and 1x, and then the greatest common factor between 10x and 2. So factor out the greatest common factor between the two sets of terms. When we do that, the greatest common factor between 5x squared and 1x is x. And then we got to work way backwards. How do we get 5x squared back? We got to multiply x by 5x. And then how do we get 1x back? We got to multiply x by 1. So we're done with this part of the problem. Now, find the greatest common factor between 10x and 2. Greatest common factor is positive 2. So then how do we get 10x back? We got to multiply 2 by 5x. And how do we get 2 back? We got to multiply 2 by 1. So notice again, our parentheses, what's inside the parentheses is the same, which is good because you want that. So now we're going to take, now we want to have twins in the parentheses. So now we're going to take one of those parentheses and rewrite them. So we have 5x plus 1. And then we're just going to take what's on the outside of each of those parentheses and write that in another set of parentheses. So x plus 2 in one, and then 5x plus 1 in the other. This right here is your final answer. If we wanted to check it to see, all you would do is distribute, use the FOILing method, and then when you combine all your like terms, you will get this answer back in the end. Let's try this one. 6x squared plus 13x plus 5. So first thing, we're going to multiply the a place by the c place. So a times c, or 6 times 5, gives us 30. Now we need the factors of 30, but they have to add up to what? 13. So 1 and 30, add those together, we get 31. 2 and 15, add those together, 17. 3 and 10 gives us 13. And 5 and 6 gives us 11. So out of these factors here, which of them gave us a sum of 13? 3 and 10. So now we're going to rewrite this as 6x squared plus 3x plus 10x plus 5, right? Remember, once we find those factors, we rewrite that middle term as the sum of those factors. So 3x plus 10x. Once we do that, we're going to break it up into two separate problems. So now we got to find the greatest common factor between this pink box and the greatest common factor between this black box. Take the GCF. The GCF between the first two is 3x. How do we get 6x squared? We got to multiply 3x by 2x. And then how do we get 3x back? 3x times 1. Factored this one out. Now let's try the second one. 10x plus 5. Greatest common factor is 5. And we could say positive 5. So I have that little plus on there. How are we going to get 10x back? Multiply 5 by 2x. And how are we going to get 5 back? Multiply 5 by 1. Our two sets of parentheses match each other. That's good. So now we take the 1 and rewrite the 1. So 2x plus 1. And then we take whatever was left on the outside and group them together. So we have 3x plus 5 times 2x plus 1. And lastly, let's try this one. 2x squared minus 23x plus 11. So we're going to multiply a times c. So 2 times 11 gives me 22. And then we need to list the factors of 22. Remember, this number right here is negative and this one is positive. So that means both of our numbers have to be what? Negative. and then we're also going to find the sum. So negative 1 times negative 22 gives us positive 22, and the sum of negative 1 plus negative 22 is negative 23. And you can also get 22 by multiplying negative 2 times negative 11, and the sum of negative 2 plus negative 11 is negative 13. So which of these adds up to negative 23? Negative 1 and negative 22. So now we're going to rewrite that problem using the factors. So 2x squared minus 1x minus 22x plus 11. Break it up into two separate problems. And now let's find the greatest common factor between each of these boxes. The first box, the greatest common factor between 2x squared and minus 1x is x. And then we multiply backwards. So we have 2x minus 1. And the second box, the greatest common factor between negative 22x and positive 11 is negative 11. So how do we get negative 22x back? We got to multiply negative 11 by 2x and by negative 1. We got our two sets of parentheses. They match each other, which is good. So now we're going to take that, rewrite that once, and then we take whatever was left on the outside and rewrite that into one parenthesis. So our final answer is x minus 11 times 2x minus 1. And as always, here's our pet of the day. This is Mrs. Batari's dog named Scooby. Scooby is a beagle hound mix. He's energetic and he loves to chew things. He once chewed her couch up, and Scooby loves to carry blankets around the house. So now guys, you're going to have a couple problems on Plus Portals that I want you guys, or on Google Classroom that I want you guys to try. If you have any questions, please be sure to email me.